came to NABI looking for my people. And after diving into sessions and chatting with folks who hail from informal educational institutions like museums and who lead networks of public universities like the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and who integrate dance and evolutionary chemical development and science literacy, I can definitely say, now these are my people. And I'm going to spend the next bit of time convincing you that I am one of your people. But what does it actually mean? So I sit between higher education and the broader public, and I pull them together in collaborations that enrich the mission of universities, in particular that help us to have better learning, better science. And I hope that in doing so, we make valuable contributions to the quality of life of people and communities in very tangible ways. So at Pitt, we are very deeply committed to our city and to our region, while also maintaining an identity as a premier research institution. Jason, my slides aren't advancing. That's okay, we have an expert in the room who travels just for these sorts of things. He doesn't travel with me, but travels with the crew that puts this on. So while you help me out with that, I'm gonna keep on talking if that's all right. And so at Pitt, we balance this idea of being deeply embedded in our city and deeply committed to our region with also upholding an identity as a premier research institution. And so we are urban located, we are urban serving, we're in the AAU, and for us, achieving the impacts that are felt through broader impacts of scientific research, it's perfectly aligned with our institutional mission, which in part states that we will make available to local communities the expertise of the university in ways that contribute to the social, intellectual, and economic development in the Commonwealth, nation, and the world. In my mind, creating the conditions for our researchers to undertake the work of broader impacts comes down to two things: infrastructure and relationships. At Pitt, we have a constellation of infrastructure and relationships that support broader impacts, such as pre-collegiate summer research initiatives at a biology, engineering, and our School of Medicine. Broad and deep networks of educators and educational institutions, such as our Pitt Bio Outreach Teachers Network. Partnerships with informal science learning institutions, such as our museum lab, and a series of artists' residencies. And grant development support personnel with expertise in broader impacts, human-centered design, interdisciplinary project development, and fluency in outreach and engagement. And most recently, our neighborhood-embedded community engagement centers. These centers are part of our neighborhood commitments, which is a partnership development strategy that has three facets. We make a long-term commitment to key neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh, where we pledge that we will be partners and resource allocators for 15 years or more. Those commitments are shaped and led by a network of collaborators who hail from the community, who are community experts and are on the ground. And finally, they're grounded by a front door to Pitt right in the heart of the neighborhoods. So the heart of the neighborhood is host then to a community engagement center. And these spaces are vibrant and welcoming. They create access points for a broad swath of community to access the university in a third space. So accessing services and programs and lifelong learning. And frankly, the physical facility is designed to facilitate collaboration between community and university. The first of our two centers is located in the heart of the Homewood neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and it opened this past October. It's 20,000 square feet of a facility that has general collaboration spaces, as well as very specific spaces that are geared for particular kinds of activities, some of those being broader impacts. As you can see here, we've got cafe workspace, lobbies, multi-purpose classrooms, conference rooms, art galleries, a maker space, computer lab, all kinds of things go into these kind of spaces. We even have a room with electrostatic flooring, which, by the way, I know some of you know about this, but I didn't until we were designing the space. We had to have electrostatic flooring for our robotics work that our young people are going to do in the neighborhood. And the beautiful part about this is that it's important for me to tell you, I'm a first-generation college student, and I had wonderful opportunities that people came to me and said, we would like for you to experience college. And do you know that I passed those opportunities up because it was way too intimidating to go to a college campus and get myself into a lab or get myself into a classroom. But in this kind of a facility, we're meeting people where they are at. It's almost that stair step where we can say, come meet Pitt in your neighborhood, and then let's come on to our campus. So here are just a couple more images of the kind of facilities that we're developing. You can see they're very filled with art, community art, by the way. There are lots of spaces for working and gathering, collaborating, and planning. And then our health and wellness facility and our educational suite comes online in the fall. So our directors that work out of these centers, who are pictured here, they have deep relationships across community organizations, informal education institutions, schools, governmental offices. They and their staff help Pitt faculty, staff, and students develop engagement partnerships and engage with residents through a variety of programming, such as dinner and dialogues, open houses, and research practice showcase. Across these examples of relationships and infrastructure, we find that our work gains public impact and has wider public participation, not to mention is more relevant for people who have been minoritized due to their race or gender or economic income when it's developed and delivered collaboratively with community-based partners, not simply offered as university services in which the public can participate. We see relationships and infrastructure yielding collaboration and partnerships, and that in turn yields relevance, quality, and participation. So I'd like to have a conversation with you, if we could. I want you to just take a couple of minutes and think about these next 3 questions. And when you've formulated an idea, I want you to turn to maybe the next 2 or 3 people sitting at your table. And I want you to share your answers. Basically, what I want to know is, in your role, do you help to develop the relationships and infrastructure necessary for community engagement? In other words, are you supporting other people who have to do this work? What does that entail? And I want to know, is this part of your formal job description? So go ahead, talk to each other for just a couple minutes, and then I'm going to hear from a couple of you. I'd love it if we could get 3 examples from the room. 3 different folks who want to talk to us about what it is that they do to support the relationships and infrastructure on their campuses. So here's how we're going to do it, just to be fair, because I know you all want to talk out loud in front of this big room. We're going to do 1 from maybe that section over there, 1 from this section in here, and 1 from that section in there. Right? Okay, so let's come over here. Who's my person that wants to talk about how they do this work on your campus? Come on now.
Okay.
Yes, here is the microphone for you.
Oh. I don't work on a campus. I work for a nonprofit. But my role has consistently been for the past 4 years to develop relationships with schools, other like-minded organizations. And we talked a little bit here about how I think for all of us, that's just a natural part of who we are. So that first question didn't identify saying, is this part of your actual job? But we feel like we do this anyway. And I would say that about myself. I live in a small community. But it has recently just become part of my formal job description to develop these relationships. So that's very new.
So just out of curiosity, did that fall into your lap, or did you plant the seed of that? Did you shape that in some way?
I think they saw that of me. I think they were like, okay, this person likes to do this anyway, and does it anyway, and now we're gonna put it in our job description so that we can attach revenue to it.
Excellent.
That's what I think happened.
Great. Yes, I have found this in other roles that I have occupied. Not only do I like this work, I'm good at this work, I'm committed to this work, so let's just formalize it. Okay, so from in this part of the room, who wants to talk to me about how you do this work? So, hey, I'm coming to y'all next, so just get ready. Come on. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Joe Miller from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. My job is Director of Community Outreach, so the answer is yes, that's part of what I do. A lot of it is matchmaking. I may get a request from the community that provides an opportunity for a university entity or vice versa. And it is part of my, it's not all of, I would call it maybe 20% of my formal job because I'm a department head as well, but the answer is yes.
So I just out of curiosity want to know, does
Yeah.
this 20% take 20% or does it take a greater percentage of your time?
Well, if we're going off of 200% total, then yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That's about the size of my pie and probably most of yours in this room. We do 200% pies. I can appreciate that. Okay, folks, last section. Who wants to talk? Like, come on, I warned you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie Farley from Virginia Tech, and my role is to liaison between Virginia Tech and the local school system, and we actually have a whole network of liaisons between museums and other school systems, so it is a part of our job descriptions.
Tell us about one relationship that you're really excited that you developed.
One relationship I'm really excited about. We have one relationship where we had a middle school teacher who had her son was really excited about VR, and she said, hey, I should do this for all of the students in my class and my school because they'll all be really excited. So we paired her with a VR researcher at Virginia Tech, and together they created a virtual reality lab in the middle school, and they trained teachers on how to use the lab and how to create lesson plans. So they when you were doing VR, you can only have one kid do it at a time. So now they had to figure out what to do with the entire other classroom of kids. So now they've created these lesson plans on how to use the space so that other teachers can use them as well.
Great. That's cool. So out of relationships come innovation, and out of innovation come programs, and out of programs come the need for more ability to support this work. So, you know, again, I go back to that question of, but are these my people? And I'm saying, I think so, but I needed a little bit more evidence. So I took a look at the program, and I did a very quick thematic analysis of the program, because that's what we do, right? And so here's what I learned. The people in this room develop programs that enable engagement, right? So teachers participating in on-campus summer research opportunities, collaborative research, research practice partnerships. These programs enable our students to be involved in K-12 STEM programming. People in this room support and guide others in articulating their impact identities, developing activities and programs around broader impacts, knowing more about broader impacts, writing broader impacts proposals, and then also we help to guide people in working effectively with underrepresented groups of people. Now, these are all words that came out of this program from the summit. People in this room forge partnerships with informal science institutions, school districts, community organizations, nonprofit organizations, incarcerated parents, other universities and research institutions, and federal agencies. And people in this room develop or manage infrastructure. That means offices, centers, people, technology, grants, so that, and these are all quotes, we can have engagement with communities in meaningful ways, strong university and community partnerships, databases that connect our community-engaged activities and community-engaged people, critical community-engaged scholarship, social impact multipliers, support for public engagement at the institutional level. So in summary, this room develops programs, supports and guides others, forges partnerships, and develops or manages infrastructure. So here's the thing. You are definitely my people. And if you went to a community engagement scholarship conference, this is exactly the profile of folks that you would be meeting, right? And some of you already do go into those networks. This is a moment for us to realize that the then is here and we're in the intersection. And what a wonderful way to take advantage of communities of practice. So I wanted to know more about this group, right? Susan told me to come. I did, not for long enough. I know now better. And while I think that I've learned a lot about this community and will probably stay plugged in, I also have to say I'm not only interested in you as a community belonging. Now I'm interested in you from an inquiry perspective. So let me explain. As Lori mentioned, one of my research agendas investigates the competencies of people who support community engagement in post-secondary education. In 2015, I became a scholar in residence with Campus Compact, which is the nation's largest association dedicated to the civic purposes of higher education. And there, I launched a project called the Community Engagement Professional in Higher Education. I and 19 research fellows from across the country set out to name the body of practice that community engagement professionals undertake within their work. And we wanted to do this for a number of reasons. First, to generate theories of effective practice, one needs to know about all the inputs to the given theory of change. And in the work of community engagement, this includes the people who are developing the relationships and infrastructure to support community engagement, right? I want to call our attention to something. In the community engagement literature, we frequently talk about institutionalization. In other words, moving this work from the periphery of the institution into the main. And we talk about institutionalizing it as a way to do that. When you read the word institutionalization, you have to scratch it out and put people, because you can't institutionalize without people. So we absolutely affect the theory of change. Second, there's a wealth of scholarship about community engagement in higher education. There are numerous professional associations, journals, research societies, books dedicated to the work. And yet, we have people coming into this work, into these positions, with no formal training or familiarity with that body of scholarship, which is absolutely fine. In fact, we should not be restricting access into this work. We should be broadening access into this work. But we felt like there needed to be a concise articulation of what community engagement professionals know and do, just as a jumping off point. Third, community engagement intersects with many other communities of practice, such as broader impacts, public humanities, economic development, anchor institution work. And we wanted to have resources for people who primarily affiliate to those other networks of practice, but whose work includes elements of community engagement. And finally, and most compellingly for me, we believe that the co-production of knowledge, which is really at the heart of community engagement in higher ed, it requires familiarity with the tenets of democratic participation, inclusion, participatory methods, and critical analysis. And what we just squeezed into that one little clause there is a huge body of work. And we have to get our minds wrapped around that, because we wanted to foreground the critical commitments and help to bring what we so often eloquently write about in our journals and our books into our everyday practice at scale. And that was critical and key. We wanted to do this at scale. So the way to do that is to name it and to make it visible and make it decipherable and make it learnable in a way that is really important. And we've got this robust field, again, of associations and practice communities and scholarship resources that we can draw on to help us to do that. And quickly what we realized was that we were articulating a competency model. Competency frameworks lay out knowledge, skill, and disposition, sometimes called attitudes, that are shared by people that are in a shared work group. So we met biweekly. We developed this competency model using multi-attribute consensus reaching method. We reviewed 463 sources of literature across 6 domains of focus. And the lit came to us from sources from 1990 to present. From each source, we identified key practices of community engagement and constructed a list of the knowledge, skills, and dispositions necessary to support those practices. Now, there was a little bit of a jump here, and I want to explain it. There's not hardly anything written about community engagement professionals. Now, we do have some literature around boundary spanners. We have a little bit of literature that talks about intermediaries, but we don't have a ton of literature that named this body of practice. So what we did was we went out and we looked at the practices and we said, okay, if I'm going to be somebody that supports that practice, what would I need to know and do and believe? And that's how we developed this list. We condensed the list thematically to produce the preliminary competency model. Then we held focus groups with 54 folks across 6 different professional meetings across the United States. And from those focus groups, we were able to reduce the number of competencies and then add new ones that were not previously captured or emphasized. Finally, we surveyed more than 400 higher education professionals across the country, self-identified as such, because they said that they had some kind of responsibility for supporting community engagement with higher education. Their years of experience range from 1 to 40 years doing this work. Again, so there's a depth of experience in this field. They were predominantly located on campuses, many of them in centers or offices that had some kind of formal titling around community engagement. Those smaller groups of respondents did come from extension, economic development, community relations, and community bridge programming. 32% of our respondents were faculty, and of that, a little more than a third were tenure track or tenured. 58% of respondents held master's degrees, and 32% held doctoral degrees. So, what can we deduce? We tend to be on campuses, not surprising because our responsibility is to support this work in higher education or to have some role in that. We tend to be highly credentialed, not surprising. Again, we're in the higher education business. We tend not to be faculty, although about a third of us are, right? Again, not surprising. And from the survey responses, we once again condensed and complicated the competency model to produce the one that we eventually published in 2017. So this is what we produced. Now, I know this image is not readable to you at your distance, though I just wanted to show you how the model is constructed. So different elements of knowledge, skill, disposition, and critical commitment were articulated across functional areas. And what I've pictured here are the sections on administering community engagement programs, facilitating faculty involvement, and cultivating high-quality partnerships. But for the purposes of today's talk, I pulled out some of the work that I thought was really applicable to broader impacts, and I want to review these quickly. Before I do this, it's going to be the second opportunity for some interaction. I want you to take note of any knowledge, skill, or disposition, something that we call an attitude, that you think is missing, that you would add to this list given your work in broader impacts, right? So now, if you get what I'm doing here, I'm doing a little bit of nascent research to try to figure out where the next article is going to come from around broader impacts professionals. Actually, I only say that in jest. I want you all to write that article. Okay, so some knowledge. So this is information that was already included in the old competency model, and I want you to be thinking about what might we be missing. So knowledge of the relevance of community engagement to other goals, such as broader impacts. Knowledge of different engagement approaches, such as knowledge mobilization, research practice partnerships, critical community engaged scholarship. Knowledge of how to assess and evaluate the impact of community engagement on its stakeholders. Knowledge of institutional policies that may affect community engagement. Knowledge of institutional constraints and possibilities that prevent or support faculty engagement. Knowledge of how to approach differently motivated faculty using different strategies. Knowledge of the surrounding community groups, institutions, and associations whose agendas complement campus goals. For example, science literacy, STEM workforce development. So those would all be examples of knowledge. In terms of skills, or abilities, as we might call them, able to facilitate partnership development meetings and programs that are inclusive, participatory, and promote reflective practice. Remember this whole thing about foregrounding the critical? This is where it starts to show up. Able to manage conflict, strategically plan, and work in fluid environments, otherwise known as the 200% pie that we all sit inside of. Able to work across disciplinary silos, cultivate and maintain relationships, and communicate effectively. Able to facilitate critical reflection, wherein researchers encounter the limits of their own experience and expertise and value that of leveraging community expertise. Able to, I think this is navigate institutional constraints and possibilities, connect campus and community assets, and facilitate collaboration across boundaries and roles between internal and external stakeholders. And now finally for the dispositions and commitments. So we think the people in this work should be able to cultivate dispositions such as innovation, right? That relationship that then gave us an innovative program. Perseverance, adaptability and risk-taking, respect for community perspectives, multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary thinking. And that we should uphold critical commitments such as recognizing the power relations inherent in partnerships between communities of different credentials, financial resources, and infrastructural resources, and cultivating authentic relationships with both formal and informal institutions.